I love Portugal. I think it's a wonderful place to live, but as I've said in some recent episodes, I don't necessarily see it as the place for me anymore. And so officially, I'm saying that I have given up on Portugal, at least for now, at this point in my life. Maybe at some point later in the future, it could be the place for me again, but I'm not so sure that it's the right place for right now. I wanted to make this episode talking about maybe some of the places I might look at in 2025. But of course, as always, I'm Rafael Di Furia, back at it again for another episode of Not Your Average Globetrotter, and roll that intro. So having been abroad 16, almost going on 17 years now, there are a lot of things that I have in front of me and behind me. Both of them I'm weighing out in different ways. And of course, as I've said in a recent episode, there are things that I am thinking about what I want in my life and how I want to set my life up for the next stages. And I have to admit, there's definitely one thing that I really do miss about not living abroad, and that is being able to speak my own language. And I can say that I don't see myself returning to the US anytime soon. And it's not necessarily because of any type of goings on there. It's just Europe has been home to me, and it's the place that I've seen as home for a long time. And even from a young age, I've known this is the part of the world that I wanted to be in. So with that consideration and knocking out New Zealand and Australia, as well as maybe a few countries in Africa, as well as maybe Singapore and parts of India. But then considering that and looking at an option in Europe where English is spoken, that leaves me basically with the UK and Ireland. Well, part of Ireland that's outside of the UK, part of Ireland that's in the UK. Man, it's confusing. I mean, I get it, but it's still confusing that there's two Irelands, even though it's one Ireland, but still two Irelands. I realize there's history on it and I'm not knocking it, so I make no judgment on that topic. Then the other options other than Ireland would be England, Scotland, Wales, Cornwall. I mean, there are these different places that have these possibilities where I could speak something akin to my language. Not exactly my language, but close enough. I mean, to be able to read documents, to be able to go and navigate the system just without having many major struggles, I think that would actually be really refreshing. However, I don't know if I necessarily could see myself living in the UK at this moment in time. Maybe Ireland. That could be a realistic possibility, although the cost of living in that part of the world, I mean, like everywhere, is definitely high, but maybe it feels a little bit higher than a lot of other options that you could have in Europe. I also just recently heard a figure, I don't know if it's true or not, but 4 people are leaving the UK every minute. And moving to another place. And even Australia has been seeing a huge influx of people from the UK. I'd say I'd find that very fascinating. And for me, maybe if it had been England, say about 10 to 15 years ago, I think I would have been more interested. Things have changed. And even from what I've been seeing of what my first experience was of the UK versus maybe what it is now, I'm not sure if it would be the place that I would be running to. It could be fun. I mean, I have family there. I'd definitely go for a vacation, but I'm not sure if it's the type of place that I really want to call home at this moment in time, even though I do have some positive opinions about that part of the world. But just before we get into the next section, I do want to say a huge thank you to those of you who helped to make these episodes possible through rafaeldifuria.com/Patreon, patreon.com/rafaeldifuria, as well as the thanks button here on YouTube and rafaeldifuria.com/support. All of these different ways do help support this project to be able to keep on pushing forward, as well as a huge thank you to those of you who share your thoughts down in the comment section below, as well as to those of you who share these episodes with your friends, as well as leave a like on these episodes. And with all that said, thank you again, and let's get into the next section. So then, if I wouldn't be going to the UK or Ireland or one of the Irelands or either of the Irelands, then maybe that brings it to the next kind of consideration of countries maybe where I do speak the language, or even if I don't speak it perfectly, that I can get by. And so Portugal, again, I love it, but it's just not a place I see myself in at this moment in time. So then maybe let's look just one country over, Spain. I love Spain also, I really do. Although I think there are some factors about life in Spain that would make it difficult for me to consider living there as well. For example, I mean, Europe in general has pretty high tax rates, but for individuals in Spain that are moving there, it can be one of the places that's maybe a little bit on the higher side in comparison to some of the other options there. There are parts of Spain where you can live and have a very really amazing cost of living, but at the same time, some of the places that I might be more interested in would not be among those. And so, for example, Madrid. It's a city I know pretty well. I'm not going to say I know it like the back of my hand, but I'm comfortable to be able to get around. The cost of an apartment there, definitely not cheap, and it's a very big city to get around. It's one of Europe's biggest cities. It does, however, have an amazing airport, so if you want to fly really anywhere around the continent, you've got a lot of really amazing options for flights from Madrid Barajas. And even though I do have family there, and it would be nice to be close to them, I see it more as a place where I can go and visit rather than make a life for myself at this moment in time. Then France. Some of you know my opinion. It's not for me. In my recent list of countries in Europe and opinions on them, I just said flat out, ew, no way, no how to France. But really, the elaboration is that I've almost never had a truly positive experience in that country. I've been there a number of times and not my favorite. It's fine, but it's just not for me. Then that brings things over to Italy. And, in many ways, Italy could make a lot of sense. It's a place that I've lived before. It's a country that is like home to me in many ways. I know how things work there. I know how to navigate the system largely. And it's a country where I'm a citizen as well. So in some ways, it could actually make sense to make my way there and to call Italy home. Although the thing is, I'm not going to say been there, done that. But maybe it would be fun to have a new experience. Maybe it would be fun to have a new adventure. Go someplace that is so far from what I'm accustomed to on any kind of regular basis. I mean, for the most part, since I left the US, I've lived in countries that were either on the Mediterranean or a culture that was Mediterranean adjacent, I guess we could say. And so from there, I start thinking about Poland. I've been there, but I can say I really enjoyed it. And it's a place that I've been wanting to go back for a long time. The downside would be winters, I think would be maybe a bit difficult to deal with. And of course, it would depend on where in the country you are. But I've been seeing a lot more interest in Poland for the last few years. And personally, I've had more interest in it. But I've also been noticing that a lot more articles are starting to pop up on just different platforms, news websites. And it seems as though it's becoming this really new, interesting place to be. And I think even some people who have been leaving Portugal have started looking at Poland. Completely opposite weather. But there are also people who are looking at maybe the tech sector and even growing businesses, building businesses in Europe. And it may not be perfect, but it could be a very interesting place to look at. And I would almost be willing to bet that it's not necessarily going to become an expat hotspot, but I think it's going to become a bit more popular over the next couple of years. And it's very probable that you could end up hearing more and more about it in different media sources and even YouTube videos. Who knows? Maybe even some of my own. I make no guarantees, but you never know what can happen. But then, of course, like I've mentioned in other videos, that I've had a curiosity about Hungary. It's just so far from what I'm accustomed to culturally and linguistically that I think it would be an interesting challenge and an interesting place to explore and try to call home, at least for a while. But I can say one shared concern that I would have between both Poland and Hungary would be the current climate in that kind of general area, and who knows what could happen. And I'm not going to go into details, but it's not far from a part of the world where things have been having some tensions over the last few years, we could say. But then there's another country which I'm curious about and have kind of mentioned this in previous episodes about how Finland has the highest number of rock bands per capita out of any country. It interests me. I'm not going to say I'm a metalhead, but I find that fascinating. However, I do get the feeling that it might just be the type of place that I would enjoy during the summertime. And winters definitely seem intense. So if Poland would have its challenges in winter, I think Finland would only prove to be a little bit more of a challenge during that time of year. But I think when it comes down to, regardless of the country, is that wherever I'm going to end up next is really where I would like to stay long term. I'm not sure that I see myself continuing to move every X amount of years from one country to the next. Even if I move within the country, that's one thing. But I would like that my next country remains my home on the long term. I think there are countries that, from a practical perspective, would be much easier to settle down in and make a life for myself, and more importantly, to be able to call home. But then there are other countries where, even though I might have an interest in them, I can't say that I know enough about it to commit to a long-term move to one of those places. The good news is that regardless of where I choose in this part of the world, traveling between places, at least if you're close to an airport, is quite easy to do, generally speaking. And that has definitely been a challenge in my time in Portugal, that I was under the impression that it was going to be easier to get flights to different locations, but it's a little bit further out of the way than even I had originally thought it might be. Of course, you have flights to some of the more popular destinations, at least from Porto. I mean, for example, in Porto, it's the easier airport to get to from Braga, where I've been living. And I actually really like the airport. I would say I prefer it over Lisbon, but I don't think that's much of a challenge to prefer another airport over Lisbon. Don't get me wrong. Lisbon's not a bad airport inherently. It's just too overcrowded with flights and people. So the big challenge at this point is finding a place where I see the possibility for a future. And I think some of the places that look the most attractive to me, they actually could prove to be some of the bigger challenges. I mean, even Spain, I had been saying earlier in the episode that I don't necessarily think that Spain would be the right choice for me. It is actually one of the places that I'm probably more interested in than many others. But one of the realities of Spain is that it could prove to be one of the places that would be more difficult, at least from a work perspective, for the types of things that I do, and also with the types of clients that I normally work with. I work marketing, video production, audio production, podcasting. I do things kind of roughly in this area, as well as consulting for businesses. And when it comes to my daily life, I do wear many hats. And when it comes to my work, in also a figurative sense, I do wear many hats as well. For each person, there are going to be pluses and minuses in each country. There's not going to be one perfect country. I mean, for example, I could start thinking about Central America and South America, or even North America, Asia for that matter. But I do see, for me, what I'm looking for in life is a base in Europe. This is where I see as home. I am familiar with this part of the world. I am at home and at ease in this part of the world. And I like this part of the world. There are a lot of people online who talk about, going here, going there, going to this, and whatever country that treats you best or whatever it may be. But I think there is also, where is the place that you just enjoy the most? Okay, maybe you could look at it from the perspective of how you can do your work only. But then what about the lifestyle? Or you could look at it from the perspective of just the lifestyle there and kind of put the work thing a little bit on a lower peg. But then how's that going to impact your lifestyle? At the end of the day, it's all about balance and figuring out what are the things that are the positives that you really, really enjoy and attract you to a place. But then what are the negatives? But with those negatives, and even if you put like a pros and cons list, some of those cons may outweigh some of the pros. I mean, say, okay, you're looking for a slower pace of life. If it's too slow, that means you could even have potential challenges with providing for yourself. And so that then, in fact, ends up hurting the lifestyle. So you have to find out, where is that place that you can potentially have what you're looking for as far as your enjoyment, your day-to-day living, but then also with being able to provide that for yourself. And I realize there are many of you who do watch these episodes who are already retired or thinking about retiring. And so that puts you in a little bit of a different situation, that if your pension, your social security, whatever that is that's coming in at the end of the month, that could end up affecting your choice and your flexibility with where you might want to go. And you might be the type of person that's looking for a few months here, a few months there, a few months there. I'm at a point where I'm just looking for there, period, with the option to be able to go and travel and go to different places. But then, of course, even if you are someone who is retired, I mean, if you're getting money from your Social Security, or if you have investments or different things, there will be different taxes that are going to affect you at the end of the day, that maybe one country is going to affect that if you're getting a royalty on something, or if you're getting your pension. I mean, pensions are going to often be taxed in many countries. So of course, that's definitely something to consider regardless of where you're going. It's really worthwhile to speak to an accountant, because what in theory that you actually have in practice could actually be a very different number. And so again, these are different little details which can actually become very big and can impact your experience overall when it comes to your new life abroad. But anyway, I'm going to round things out here for this episode. So of course, a huge thank you to those of you who helped to make these episodes possible through patreon.com/RafaelDiFuria, RafaelDiFuria.com/Patreon, as well as the thanks button here on YouTube, as well as RafaelDiFuria.com/support for the one-time support, as well as thank you to those of you who share these episodes with your friends and leave your thoughts down in the comment section below, as well as give these episodes a like. They all very much help in their own different ways. And of course, this is an open conversation. So if you are wanting to share about what you're looking for and what's important to you, I think it would also be interesting for other people to look and be able to read through. And even for me, I'm also always curious about what are the things that people are looking for? What makes the biggest difference to them? I think, of course, wherever you can afford to live is a place where you can be happy. But anyway, I'm Rafael Di Furia. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Not Your Average Globetrotter, and I'll see you all next time. Later.